Welcome back, everybody, to Everyday A&P. Today, we're going to be talking about prokaryotic cells versus eukaryotic cells. So, before we dive deeper into the other various concepts in biology, we want to define and understand the difference between these two types of cells. So, on the left here, we'll start with the prokaryotic cell. All right, so what is a prokaryotic cell? Well, first and foremost, it is the oldest form of cellular life. All right, when we talk about prokaryotic cells, we are most likely going to encounter bacteria, or archaea. All right, so those are the two types that we will most likely be encountering when we talk about or when we see prokaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells, right, they are single-celled organisms. They're single-celled, so prokaryotes are single-celled. Bacteria are single cells. And one thing that we forgot to mention here is archaea, right? These guys can survive in extreme environments. All right, so they can survive when it's extremely hot, extremely cold, extremely acidic, or any of those types of extreme environments that we could possibly think of. So first, they are single-celled. Then we know that they are smaller. They're smaller than eukaryotic cells. And we might question, okay, well, how much smaller are they? Well, prokaryotes are roughly around 0.1 to 5 micrometers in diameter. And eukaryotic cells, I'll write it down here, are anywhere between 10 to 100 micrometers in diameter. So relatively larger than prokaryotic cells. So we have prokaryotic cells that are single-celled organisms. They're smaller than eukaryotic cells, and we have two different types of classifications underneath that umbrella, where we will mostly encounter bacteria, and then archaea, which can survive in extreme environments. The third component that we can see in prokaryotic cells that we probably will not see, that we won't see in eukaryotic cells, is that prokaryotes have a cell wall. Not only that, but they also lack membrane-bound organelles. They lack membrane-bound organelles. All right. Oops. There we go. So prokaryotes are single-celled, they're smaller than eukaryotic cells, and they have a cell wall, and they lack membrane-bound organelles inside of the cell. Later on, when we talk about different types of testing, they have testing for bacteria called gram-positive or negative testing, which tests for the thickness of the cell wall, and it has a lot to do with drugs and how these bacteria can be affected by certain pharmaceutical substances. Moving over to the eukaryotes, all right, we'll use a different color here. The eukaryotic cell, first and foremost, the biggest thing that we can use to identify whether it is a eukaryotic cell or not is the presence of membrane-bound organelles. Then, the other thing, right, the other component that we can use to classify it as a eukaryotic cell is the presence of a nucleus. Presence of a nucleus. Here we have our DNA, right? So Eukaryotic cells have DNA that is enclosed inside of a nucleus, which then can be transcribed and then translated in the cytoplasm during protein formation, or it can be replicated when we talk about mitosis. That is something that we will cover later on. And speaking of mitosis, the third component, right, is mitotic division. Eukaryotic cells can undergo mitotic division to multiply, whereas prokaryotic cells will go through a process known as binary fission to replicate itself. So those are the overarching differences between prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. We'll zoom out right there. So that is the overarching difference, right? The biggest thing to remember is that eukaryotic cells have membrane-bound organelles. They have a nucleus, and they go through mitosis to replicate. Whereas prokaryotic cells are single. They're single-celled, and they're smaller. They're significantly smaller than eukaryotic cells, and they lack those membrane-bound organelles. In the future videos, we're going to be covering the eukaryotic cell specifically and the different organelles and its functions and how it plays a role in the survival of the cell. So we'll break down these different organelles and the different functions video by video, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful in whatever process of your learning you are in right now, and like and subscribe to this channel, and we will see you guys again in the next video. Take care, everybody.